I decided to end my marriage because I thought my husband, who was having money problems, wasn't worth much. But everything changed on a business trip when he suddenly told me he not only wanted a divorce but was also marrying someone else. He accused me of only marrying him for his money and wanted me to give up any claim to our property. Facing my cold husband, who had never really respected me since we got married, caused him to fall apart and hit rock bottom. I'm Karen, 35 years old, raised by my single mom since my dad died when I was in kindergarten. Despite our financial struggles, we were happy as a family of 3. Even as an adult with a good job, I kept my thrifty habits from childhood. I married John, a rich man I met through a friend, attracted by his kindness and the wealthy life he offered. But after we got married, we clashed over money and traditional gender roles. While John wanted a traditional family setup, I was focused on my career and being financially independent. Before we got married, John wanted me to stay at home and take care of the household, assuming I'd be happy with traditional roles. I told him I wanted to keep working until we had kids, pointing out the financial advantages. He eventually agreed, but managing both work and chores at home turned out to be really hard. Even though I worked full-time, most of my day was spent on household duties, leaving little time for us as a couple. Meanwhile, John took on the traditional husband role but didn't help out with any household tasks. While he saw how busy I was, he mostly just relaxed after work and enjoyed dinner. As time went on, juggling work and home life started to strain our relationship, making me wonder if this was what marriage was really supposed to be like. Despite all my efforts, I was afraid to speak up about my unhappiness because I worried John might insist I quit my job. Even though he didn't help with household chores, I hoped that having children would improve our relationship. Sadly, we had grown distant, and I started to doubt if we could even have a family together. Feeling anxious about this, I finally brought it up with John. "Hey, don't you think we should start thinking about having kids?" I asked. "Kids? You seem pretty energetic for someone who's exhausted from work and chores," he replied. "It's not about that. I really want to have children. We haven't been married that long, but I'm already over 30. Women have a limited time to have kids, and it's getting harder for me to get pregnant as I get older. It's almost too late. But we don't really need kids. If we have one, you'll expect me to help out, right? I'm busy with work, and I won't be able to help with raising a child." "It's odd to say you won't help with raising our child even before they're born, don't you think? I'm prepared to raise them on my own, but shouldn't you at least want to help? It's your child too. Raising kids is your responsibility. I work to support the family, so I won't be involved in raising them. You'll just complain that I don't help and make me out to be the bad guy. Maybe you've grown up thinking you have to have lots of kids because of being poor, but we're not poor. We don't need kids." End of discussion. With that, John abruptly ended the conversation and went to his room alone. In the living room, tears streamed down my face. Not only was my wish for children rejected, but my upbringing was also ridiculed. After that incident, our relationship quickly deteriorated. We hardly communicated, and the idea of having children seemed even further away as I continued to handle big projects at work while managing everything at home. I found myself growing more distant from John. One day, when I told him about an upcoming business trip, he surprisingly wished me well and hinted at a big surprise when I returned. Despite my feelings of giving up on him, his kindness and smile made me waver. But when I got home, my faint hope was shattered. The front door wouldn't open. John revealed the first surprise. He had changed the locks. The second surprise was even more shocking. He told me he had filed for divorce, claiming he had forged my signature with a friend as a witness. He handed me a document to sign, giving up my rights to our property. I protested his false accusations and insisted we both renounce our property rights publicly. John stubbornly refused and redrafted the document on his computer, sparking a tense argument. As I left the house, he insulted me for being poor and threatened to throw away my things. A few days later, John panicked and called me. "Why are you saying I didn't do anything? What's going on?" I asked. "I've been told to leave the apartment," he said. "You were still living there. That's not allowed. It's a new month. You're trespassing." "Trespassing? But it's my house." "Are you okay? Did you forget it was a company apartment I rented? I was the leaseholder, so naturally, you can't live there anymore." "That's ridiculous. How could you do this? I can't believe you didn't know." "I'm not the one who should be accused of acting alone here. Didn't I tell you that you can't just change the locks on a rented apartment? It's my house. I can change the locks if I want." "Didn't you hear me? It was my lease, not yours. Even if you were the leaseholder, the apartment manager is the owner. You can't change the locks without informing them." "Is that so? Also, I ended the lease while you were changing the locks. I was allowed to stay there until this month. I was planning to come back, but now you've unlawfully altered someone else's property, which could be considered criminal damage." "Wait, why did you end it so early? Criminal damage? Is that why the police are at the front door now?" "I'm too scared to open it," he confessed. Don't worry, it's probably not about trespassing or criminal damage. It's best to talk to them and find out. Why would the police be here? Because I reported you for filing the divorce papers yourself. It seems you've committed crimes like forgery and using a private document fraudulently. Divorce papers can be filed by one person, but only if both parties agree and personally sign them. Since John forged my signature and the witness, it's clearly a crime. He seemed unaware of the severity of his actions, so I pressed on. So the divorce papers you submitted are invalid, and your marriage to Susan can't happen either. How do you know about Susan? Did you think I wouldn't find out? I hired a private detective agency to thoroughly investigate your affair with Susan. It was challenging to manage during a busy time at work. You even had a lavish wedding ceremony while I was supposedly on a business trip. Wait, your business trip was a lie? Yes, I took time off work, despite being busy, to gather evidence and prepare documents. I knew about you bringing Susan home. It would have been impossible to do all this while working. After I revealed everything, John was speechless and sounded upset, even over the phone. Then he pleaded with me, "Please don't tell Susan." I'm divorced? Why would I? There's no truth to that. Really? Thank you. Are you misunderstanding something? When did you think we got divorced? That fake divorce paper is invalid. Legally, you're still my husband, not divorced. What? So, because you committed adultery, legally Susan owes compensation as my husband. I sent the demand for repayment to her house yesterday by express delivery. She didn't know you were married, right? I can't withdraw the claim now. I know Susan believed you were single, but I still sent the demand deliberately. Susan hasn't contacted me yet, so maybe she hasn't received the letter. It should arrive soon. Should you be on the phone with me when you also have to deal with the police? You're busy. I'll ignore the police. I won't be arrested. I'm going to Susan's house now to get the letter back before she or her family can accept it. Then he hung up. He probably went straight to Susan's house to wait for the postman at the front door. I knew it would be pointless because the letter was sent as registered mail to Susan only. Even if he waited for the postman, he wouldn't be able to receive it. A few hours later, John called me, sounding dejected. He recounted an incident with the postman. I'm here to pick up that envelope. Who are you? You don't live here, do you? I practically live here since I'm married. I have the right to get the mail. I understand, but I can't give you this envelope. It's registered mail meant only for Susan. What? Just give it to me. No, I can't do that. If you really want it, you should ask Susan for permission. What's happening here? Oh, John, what's all this commotion? What's going on? Ah, Susan. This is registered mail for you. This man insisted on taking it. Sorry for the disturbance. I'll be on my way now. What's this? A demand for compensation? John, you were married. What's happening? Sorry, it's just, she's an ex-wife from a long time ago. I was embarrassed to say I'm divorced. I'm sorry for keeping it a secret, but isn't this strange? We haven't been dating long, and a demand for compensation. If I was divorced before we started dating, there shouldn't be any issue, right? Well, my ex-wife is upset. Maybe she's demanding compensation out of spite because I got married. That was his excuse, but it was quickly debunked. The envelope included a letter I wrote along with my contact information, so Susan called me directly. During that call, I explained the affair, the invalid divorce, and how they had a wedding ceremony while he was still legally married to me. Despite the ceremony, they hadn't officially registered their marriage yet. John had planned to do it on April Fool's Day, but it was still pending. He likely delayed registering the marriage because he wasn't sure if the divorce was finalized. After being caught at Susan's house, John shamelessly reached out to me again. I still had some things to discuss with him, so we agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. As soon as I arrived, John started pleading, "Karen, please withdraw the compensation claim. Let's act like we've been separated for a long time and are officially divorced. Then I can apologize to Susan for hiding our divorce and maybe smooth things over. Do you think I'm desperate to stay married to you? I was already planning to file for divorce, but because you cheated, you'll pay compensation. Trying to squeeze money out of me, huh? Typical. Depending on my answer, everything could change. There's still an option where we don't get divorced. If I say no, you can't just reject it. That means you can't marry Susan, and your marital status will be exposed. Fine, I'll pay the compensation. Just divorce me now. Sign here. Then what about property division? How much more do you want? The compensation should cover it. Remember, we agreed to waive property division, right? Let's make it official. All right, you're not as bad as I thought. Thank you. We then went to a public notary, drafted a document for compensation and property agreement, and then to City Hall to submit the divorce papers, finalizing our divorce. Relieved, I exchanged final words with John. I'm glad we don't have to split our property. What do you mean? I'm the one benefiting from that. By the way, do you even have assets left after paying me compensation? Susan will also demand damages. She mentioned billing you for the wedding expenses. That's not possible. I'm marrying Susan. She won't make such claims. We're divorced now, so there shouldn't be any issues. You're still living in a fantasy. You committed marriage fraud. You had a wedding while still legally married. Do you really think Susan will still trust you? Marriage fraud is serious. Susan will believe me. You can count on that. I heard it directly from Susan. And weren't the guests at your wedding paid actors? You still owe them. You know about that. I haven't settled with them yet. Why do you care? You could have just agreed to property division and come out ahead. That's what I wanted to tell you. Even if we had divided the property, you would have ended up better off. What are you talking about? Calling me poor? Your family might be modest, and you only make $115,000 a year, right? Even with a raise, it wouldn't be more than $20,000. You don't own any property. You keep accusing me of being poor, but it seems you've misunderstood. Yes, my salary is $115,000, but I work for a foreign company. Did you know I'm the director of the American branch now? It's not $115,000 per year. It's $155,000 per month. That makes an annual income of $1.8 million. You're still not getting the numbers right. How do you manage to keep your job? It's $1.8 million per year. $1.8 million? That can't be true. Of course, I haven't had the chance to spend such an amount, so I've been saving it for the future. The savings from before our marriage aren't part of the property division, but there's still a substantial amount accumulated during our marriage. You were my spouse, after all. I'll have the divorce papers corrected. Are you all right? After all the disrespect, you expect me to happily undo the divorce? If you have that much money, why bother contesting the compensation, right? It's just a small amount to you. Whoever laughs at a penny will cry for a penny. This compensation is for the emotional pain you caused me. Honestly, I could ask for more. Now that it's settled, make sure you pay it, even in installments. I'll be frugal. Also, don't go back to that apartment. Your things should already be moved to your parents' house. You may have thought I didn't have much, but I had already moved most of my belongings. Were you that indifferent to me? I have so little I have to go back to my parents' place. They don't know everything yet, do they? Let me explain. Don't say anything. I've already told them everything. They deserve to know why we're divorcing. Oh, and your father said, never set foot in our home again. He collapsed and I left the cafe. Later I heard he caused trouble at the police station. Despite my advice, he returned to the apartment. He sat there aimlessly in the empty apartment until the manager called the police, and he was taken away. It's unclear whether he was arrested for obstructing public duties, trespassing, or due to the forged divorce papers. Eventually, his parents took responsibility for him. After speaking with me and learning about Susan, they decided that their first priority was to apologize and pay damages to Susan's family. They visited Susan's house and knelt in front of her family to apologize. They settled everything without pursuing charges for marriage fraud, even covering the costs of the wedding. I had expected them to pursue legal action, so it was disappointing that they didn't. So I decided to pursue legal action against him for forging the divorce papers. John offered a settlement, but I refused to withdraw the lawsuit. I didn't want him to think that his actions could be resolved simply with money. I wanted him to face the consequences and understand the seriousness of what he had done, even if it required time and effort on my part. I left everything in the hands of my lawyer to ease the burden on myself. Although it took time, John was exposed for his actions and the marriage fraud. He couldn't continue working at his company after being detained by the police and subsequently going absent without leave, leading to his eventual termination. He ended up living with his parents, working long hours at a relative's construction company. His father took control of his earnings, leaving him with very little income. I had expected his parents to support him, but they were stricter than I imagined. They paid the compensation I was owed and settled with Susan's family, planning to make John work tirelessly until he repaid everything. He lived in a makeshift accommodation without electricity, receiving only $5 per day for food, which was deducted from his earnings. Their intention was to pressure him until he paid off his debts, and then they planned to push him out, a harsh consequence after years of relative comfort. After the divorce was finalized, I was offered a position at our head office abroad, so I moved overseas. I had concerns that John might try to reach out for help or harbor resentment, but moving abroad eased those worries. Initially, I thought work would be my focus for a while, but soon I found a new relationship. I'm now dating a foreign executive from our head office, and I'm pregnant with plans to marry soon. I've been open with him about my past and my ex-husband, and he's been understanding and supportive. I'll be taking maternity leave soon and intend to return to work, with his full support. He's eager to take paternity leave and co-parent, which reflects a different cultural perspective. After enduring torment from my ex-husband, I finally feel like I'm achieving genuine happiness and confidence in building the family I've always dreamed of. Many people suffer due to selfish spouses, and while divorce isn't always the ideal solution, enduring in silence isn't virtuous either. It's crucial to understand that honest discussions can lead to resolutions, and sometimes divorce becomes the necessary path forward.